Circumstances led two high school sweethearts never to meet again. One day 50 years later, the man burst into tears after recognizing his beloved he had lost foraging for food in a dumpster. Behind every unsuccessful love story are untold tales of pain, heartbreak, and an unfulfilled desire to unite in life. But 68-year-old Richard's love story is a little more than that. He closed his teary eyes and sank into his pillow thinking about his sweetheart Iris. "It's been 50 years since I last saw you, darling. I'm still not able to forget you." Richard was still a bachelor and desperately waited for his high school sweetheart Iris, who he last saw at the airport in 1972. It had been a 50 exhausting years since then. Iris never returned, but Richard didn't lose hope. Somewhere in his heart, he still had hopes of meeting her. But why did Iris stop writing letters to Richard all of a sudden? They were madly in love, but what led her to forget him? Did she betray him, or was it something else poor Richard could never imagine? Richard and Iris met in their junior year of high school in the late 1960s. When they first sat next to each other, they didn't think they would soon flip over a new chapter called love in their lives. Iris fell head over heels in love with Richard's sense of humor and dimpled smile. Richard, too, reciprocated Iris's feelings for him because he knew she was the one. What started as friendship soon sparked into a classic love story. Richard would cycle early to school to meet his girlfriend and spend time with her. They went to Sunday school together, met every evening in the park under the pretext of walking their dogs, and made every little effort to celebrate their fairy tale love. One could easily make out that the pair was madly in love. Soon things started getting intense when Richard and Iris planned their future together. "I love you," said Richard, going down on one knee dramatically with Iris's favorite red roses in his hand. "Will you be mine?" At first, the couple shared a hearty laugh. Iris accepted his bouquet but couldn't smile further. She painfully revealed about moving to another state with her parents because of her father's job. "I tried convincing my parents to put me in the boarding in our school until I finished exams and then send me to a local college here, but they want me to go with them. I'm so upset and I'll miss you," sobbed Iris. Richard was crushed and had to plan to unite with her again in the other state she was relocating to. "It doesn't matter if you can't stay here. I can come to you, can't I?" he laughed. "I'll join the college you're going to, and nothing can separate us again." Iris sighed with relief, and they planned to go to the same college, but fate had other plans in mind. With just 3 months left for their senior year exams, Iris moved to another state with her parents, promising to write letters to Richard. It was the only way they kept in touch. A week later, Richard went to the airport to see his girlfriend one last time. It was a tear-jerking moment for both of them. They promised each other they would soon meet, but who knew this would be their last meeting and they would never see each other for the next 50 years. A few days after parting, Richard got his first letter from Iris. He was so delighted and kept reading what she'd written word to word over 100 times. He told his parents about his plans to marry Iris after graduation, and luckily they were supportive. Days passed and Richard kept getting more letters from Iris. 6 months vanished like thin air before he knew it, and soon it was time to join the college in the other state where Iris lived. Richard's heart started to race to meet his girlfriend. These 6 months seemed like 6 decades without her. He flew to the state she lived in and couldn't wait to go to the college and reunite with her. "Iris, I'm coming for you," he mumbled while taxiing to the college. Before entering his class, Richard anxiously looked for Iris's name on the notice board, but her name wasn't there. He assumed there could have been some kind of mistake and entered his class, hoping to see her there because they planned to pursue the same major. Unfortunately, Iris didn't show up and the attendance was already over. Heartbroken and disappointed, Richard went to all first-year classrooms to see if Iris was there somewhere, but she wasn't. Richard didn't lose hope and wrote to her address. "Yes, how may I help you?" an older woman answered Richard, who stood restlessly at the doorstep. He peered inside, but Iris wasn't there and the woman wasn't related to her because he knew her parents well. The woman frowned and told him nobody with the name Iris lived there. "But I used to get letters from her which were posted from this address. It's been a month since she wrote to me. Please, I know she's in there." The woman pitied Richard and told him they were new to the place. "I think the person you want to meet must have lived here before. We bought this house a month ago," she said. "No, I'm sorry, but I don't know them. My husband might have known, but he passed away 2 weeks ago. I'm not sure if I can help you, young man." The woman didn't have further details to share and sent a disappointed Richard away. Richard couldn't focus on his studies. He kept looking for Iris everywhere but unsuccessful in finding her. He even called his parents and asked them to check her old house in their hometown. His heartbreak doubled when they informed him that Iris's house had been unlived and locked for a long time. "Where did she go? God, how will I find her?" he cried. Poor Richard spent several months torn between finding Iris and concentrating on his degree. One day when he least expected it, he got a mail from Iris's parents. He kept reading it repeatedly 100 times, and every time his heart pounded faster, willing to stop beating. It read, "Dear Richard, we're sorry our daughter Iris was sick for the past few months and died last week. It would be best if you didn't come looking for her. Goodbye." It didn't add up to Richard. A part of him died reading this letter, but the other part refused to accept what was written. He wrote back to Iris's parents for details, but they never responded. He even tracked down their address and went there, only to find it locked and unlived. "Iris, what happened to you? Where are you?" he cried on the doorstep. Richard couldn't move on completely from the trauma but pulled himself together to do it. He graduated, found a job, and moved on in life. 50 years had passed, but he still wasn't entirely out of his heartbreak. A lot had changed in these 5 decades, but Richard's love for Iris remained immortal. He never married anyone and chose to stay single. One day, he moved back to his hometown and decided to visit the old house where Iris once lived. The house was deserted and appeared as though it was haunted by classic memories of Richard and Iris's laughter and their secret meetings. Knowing he wouldn't find anyone there, Richard went to the doorstep and peered inside the abandoned house. He hoped Iris would answer his knocks on the door. It was like a daydream, one that would never happen in reality. Richard walked away to the street sobbing until he saw an older woman digging through a dumpster across the road. Beyond her wrinkles, dirt, and gray hair, Richard could still recognize that face. It was Iris. Iris, God, am I still alive to see her like this? Iris stopped whatever she was doing and turned around, tearing up. She could still recognize that voice and stood frozen on the pavement. Richard knelt beside her and cried for a very long time, holding her. Darling, where were you all these years? I was looking for you everywhere but couldn't find you. What happened? Cried Richard. Then he heard the momentous truth that unfolded that broke his heart. My parents learned of our relationship, Iris disclosed. What happened then? Asked Richard, curious to piece together the 50 years they'd lost. We relocated to the other state and I was almost about to enroll in college when they caught me sending letters to you. They discovered our plans to meet in college and hurriedly took me to another state. It turns out that Iris's parents had always disapproved of her relationship with Richard. They discontinued her senior year and relocated to a different state, assuming it would end a relationship with him. But after learning of their plans to reconcile in college, they moved from there and forbade Iris from writing to Richard ever again. I sent you letters secretly after that. My parents somehow found out and prevented them from being posted, Iris sobbed. Several years later, they died. I wanted to reach out to you, but I lost your address. I couldn't track you down in your college because you already graduated and moved out. Richard's heart sank the more he heard. Then I moved to this town, wishing we would meet someday. I even went to your house, but it was already locked. I started wandering the streets with a strong desire to meet you one day, she sobbed. I couldn't return to my house here because my parents had sold it and nobody's lived there for a long time. I lived on the streets and feasted on leftovers and dumpsters. I was waiting for you all these years. Richard remained speechless and only cried. I just moved back to my hometown. My house remained locked all these years after my parents died. I should have come back long ago. I'm sorry for making you wait, he wept. He helped Iris get up and hugged her. Let's go home, he said as they turned around and walked toward his house. Richard and Iris started living together, making up for the 50 years they'd lost. Time and age do not matter in love, and this couple was toward their mutual goal of living the rest of their lives peacefully in love.